All right, so now we are concluding Jean Gebser's ever-present origin, and now comes to my favorite section of the book, at least of volume 2, which is the discussion of the arts of form, architecture, music, painting, and literature. And here I want to look at some of the architecture first. This is Mies van der Rohe, the Barcelona pavilion, which was constructed in, I believe it was 1926, if I remember right. And so here's the essence of modernist architecture. I want to play some modernist music to go along with this from Schoenberg, Verklärte Nacht. So you can get the sense that the music is consistent with the epoch. Just as we have here a sense of floating planes that are not confined to a perspectival box of any kind, but the walls float free, the roof floats free. Just as in this music too, if you listen to the violins, it has a sense of the violins as floating, layer upon layer, not confined to a single perspective at all. There is no privileged point of view in either the music or the architecture. And then here's another example of it, Oscar Niemeyer, the Brazilian pavilion from 1938, also a sense of floating planes. This architecture is rather boring. Phoenix inherited this architecture. The high school that my parents attended and that also Spielberg attended, Arcadia High School, is modeled just after this. So to me, it looks very boring and banal. I don't see anything spiritual or transcendent about it. But here we have with the A. Conger Goodyear house from 1938, I believe it was built, is the supersession of dualism that is evident in the elimination of the dualism between inside and outside. That's just gone here with the glass wall. So it does transcend dualism. It's aperspectival in that sense and irrational. It is not a regression to irrationality. If anything, it does strike one with a certain cold rationality in terms of the formality of it. But it does. I do agree with Gebser that it supersedes the dualism of indoors, outdoors. Same thing here with Walter Gropius, the Bauhaus, 1925. It's kind of a series of floating planes. The horizontal is favored here, as it is in Frank Lloyd Wright. Except with American skyscrapers, modernism takes the form of vertically tall buildings. Okay, and that's some of the music, and then there's also, I've got Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. And once again, as you listen to the music, back over the architecture. It's consistent. The music has a sense of broken, fragmented forms, which indeed is how a Picasso painting might strike you at first glance until you think more about it, that it actually is not broken. It's a whole, because it's trying to grasp from all sides simultaneously. Music here, and then so when we move into postmodern architecture, though, something else is going on here, and this is where I think that Gebser's integral aperspectival breaks down and it is no longer valid. Postmodern architecture is not about the integral at all. It is about making fun of forms. It does not take them seriously. It lampoons and ridicules them. Who says we can't have a building in the shape of a pair of binoculars? It's meaningless and pointless, but let's go ahead and do it anyway. Or a building in the shape of a single Ionic capital, or even a building in the shape of a picnic basket. It's all fun, silly, and worthless. It's trivial architecture. It has no meaning, no depth, no transcendence in it whatsoever. There's nothing integral, aperspectival about it at all. And this is why, after having read through this book and finished it for like the third time now, I have come to the conclusion that the integral cannot last beyond modernist art and architecture. It just does not, at least not to my way of seeing. And here's some postmodern music. Philip Glass from his opera on Akhenaten. This music has nothing whatsoever in common with Schoenberg or with Stravinsky. It's a different epoch. It's a different form language. Likewise, too, I think with hypermodernity, which comes about around 1995 with the advent of the internet, we move into a different era there, too. This is Zaha Hadid, who is the premier hypermodern architect. She is taking form seriously here. These are metaphysical forms. It's based on non-Euclidean geometry, so she goes back and retrieves that from the integral, the aperspectival integral. But nonetheless, this is something very different from postmodern art, as well as from modernist art. This is the hypermodern age, where there's a sense of the serenity and the soaring and the oniric, dreamlike quality of these non-Euclidean geometries that is very, very different from the rectilinear geometries. If you go back and look at modernist architecture, it's all right angles. It's all rectilinear, almost all of it. It's very rational. It's very cold. It's very masculine. That's not the case with Zaha Hadid. She retrieves the body of the goddess from the mythical consciousness structure and paints the hypermodern and uses it as the content of the new hypermodern consciousness that came into being around 1995. Now, in my book, Art After Metaphysics, I did not make the distinction between postmodern art and hypermodern art because I wasn't yet aware that there was a distinction. So I've since come to clarify my perspective. This is another one, Santiago Calatrava, another great hypermodern artist who takes form seriously. These are biomorphic forms. This looks rather like some sort of an animal here, or skeletons, skeletal structures. He designs bridges as though it were a series of vertebrae, horizontal vertebrae. And so he takes form very seriously as well. This is a different epoch that we're in here. And even the music, too, sounds different. If you listen to Anna Klein here, this could very well be the music for this architecture. It has the same oniric, floating, dreamlike quality that takes metaphysics seriously, takes meaning seriously. So hypermodernity is no longer about making fun of meaning. It's about an earnest quest to retrieve meaning, metaphysical structures, but non-traditional ones. That's the thing about it. It's non-traditional metaphysical structures. This art has nothing to do with the aperspectival integral, in my opinion. Nothing whatsoever. Neither the music nor the architecture. Beautiful music. And then, so let's go back and look at the painting then. So Paul Klee is without doubt one of the preeminent integral artists. There is no point of a Paul Klee canvas that is privileged, that has a privileged point of view. It's rendered as a single diaphanous, transparent whole. And it's diaphanous to spiritual metaphysical structures, as Gebser puts it. There are metaphysical macrostructures, metaphysical microstructures. These are all the structures that are behind the visible world. It's the quest for what I called in my book, Art After Metaphysics, for the hyperdimensional object that is beneath and behind and beyond the world, but yet is made transparent. These are almost like these paintings are almost like stained glass in the sense that they render a completely holistic image. And here, there's no privileged point of view. There's up and down are not even clearly distinguished. They're transcended. So we have a supersession of night and day, up and down, the vertical and the horizontal axes. Nowhere is there a privileged point of view in a Paul Klee painting, any more than there is in a Picasso work of art, of course. Same exact thing here, no privileged point of view. At first glance, Picasso looks like it's a collection of broken shards from the metaphysical age, from Heidegger's metaphysical age that has here collapsed, and that Heidegger was aware had collapsed, and that he himself was outside of the metaphysical age. That's why I called my book on contemporary art, Art After Metaphysics. And here he'll paint the profile of a woman, as well as her full face and phase. Same thing here with the self-portrait. So it's integrating multiple perspectives and points of view simultaneously. And it is not making fun of meaning. It is not making fun of form. Marcel Duchamp is the first to do that. And he is the godfather in that sense of postmodern art. But something different goes on here when we get, I think, when the art world shifts from Paris to New York in the 1950s with Mark Rothko and Jackson Pollock. This is something very different. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is no longer integral at all. Rothko spent the first 40 years of his art recycling modernist iconotypes like this painting here, which is sort of or this one here, which is sort of like a repetition of a modernist work of art, same sort of microstructural and macrostructural aperspectival archetypes. But then what he does is he has this middle period of here, these are called multiforms, where you can start to see the modernist iconotypes are melting off of his canvas. They're melting and transitioning. Right here is another example of them. These are in between his modernist forms, which are imitations of sort of like Miro and Kandinsky and artists of that sort. And then it melts down, and then it transitions into these luminous squares, which I called in my book elementary units of being, which is essentially what they are. They're also semiotic vacancies, where all the iconotypes, not only of the mental rational with their classical iconotypes and Christian iconotypes, have been melted down, but also the iconotypes of modernist integral aperspectival art. Those are gone. They just aren't here anymore. And the same thing is true with Jackson Pollock, who also begins with modernist iconotypes over here. These are early paintings of his. This painting, Birth, has no privileged point of view. Neither does this one here. The stenographic woman, who is a goddess, Jungian goddess archetype, lying horizontally with her head over here, legs spread apart here, with mathematics all over her, as though she were the goddess of curved space, the aperspectival integral non-Euclidean curved space. But then he explodes that with the Guggenheim mural, which is, let's see, the Guggenheim mural is over here. You can see him painting it, and it shows in the movie on him, where the forms are beginning to melt down. These correspond morphologically to Rothko's multiforms, where he's melting down the iconotypes of modernity, and so is Pollock. And here is the explosion of formlessness. Just as the atom bomb at about the same time was breaking form into pure energy, so too we have the atom bomb of the works of art of the drip paintings of Jackson Pollock and the luminous squares of Mark Rothko. This is no longer integral art. It just is not. And Joseph Beuys is another example here. Beuys is a pure postmodern artist. He almost defines it as much as Andy Warhol does. What Beuys is doing here is working with a world of broken forms, forms that no longer speak, forms that no longer have meaning. And he's showing the West's metaphysical system of cognition has lost the ability to produce meaningful forms. These are mute forms, they're broken forms in Beuys, a collection of broken objects, as is also the case in Anselm Kiefer, who inherits his basic point of view. And then, of course, nobody typifies postmodern art more than Andy Warhol does. He is the absolute epitome of it, making fun of meaning, random consumer objects, the repetition of forms, mass reproduction of characters like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. He creates the cult of the celebrity. No meaning is to be found anywhere, and anyone who is looking for meaning is completely ridiculed and made fun of. As Paul Thek was, for instance. He was a contemporary artist in New York who was contemporary with pop art, and he was chased out of it. He wound up in Europe for a while. And then, but now I think here again, we have something different. Just as with Zaha Hadid, now we have hypermodern art here with Anish Kapoor. The morphic forms are similar to those of Zaha Hadid, the spherical forms, the non-Euclidean geometries, but he is not making fun of meaning. He is taking it seriously, and he is a displaced Hindu Indian artist practicing in New York, and these are very fascinating to me. They strike me as sort of anti-objects. They don't have meaning in them, but at the same time, they don't resist meaning. There's a kind of double irony there. There's meaning can be found in them, as I did find, and I wrote about it in Art After Metaphysics, but it's no longer postmodern. This is a different world. His world is very consistent, I think, with Zaha Hadid's world and Santiago Calatrava, as is also the Chinese artist Guy Kuo Jiang. Here he is. He is retrieving traditional shamanistic forms and traditional Chinese forms. He's not making fun of meaning. He's trying to do something new with ancient Chinese mythological forms, such as the tiger and the dragon monster here as the crocodile. And he'll play with shipwrecks, and all kinds of meaningful possibilities are going on here, especially with this tiger that's riddled full of arrows. What does that mean? It's worth contemplating. And then there's no better photographer for hypermodernity than Edward Burtynsky. This man is just amazing. What an eye this man has. He takes landscapes and he photographs them in such a way that, and I believe it's, I forget whether he's digital or not, but it doesn't matter, because what he does is he paints using landscapes. Each one of these is more a painting almost than it is a photograph. So this is something very different from the photography of modernity, the integral modernist period. If you think of the photographers like Stieglitz and Ansel Adams and so forth, it's a totally different thing than what's going on here. He's finding metaphysics in landscapes through the lens. Spectacular. And then I think of this guy here, Hassan Elahi, as the sort of equivalent to, he is the Andy Warhol of hypermodernity, because what he shows us in his works of art is precisely the problem that we're struggling with in hypermodernity, that is to say, information overload. Each one of these individual cells is meaningless in and of itself, but when they are, all of them are grouped together in this kind of collage, there's a point being made here that we've got too much. There's a point where too much is not enough in hypermodernity. It's the too muchness of it, I think, that Elahi captures here perfectly. It may not be spiritual. There may not be any kind of spiritual revelation there, but it does seem to be an art that is consistent with an age of electronics and information overload and digital technologies. That is all captured here by Hassan Elahi. There's nothing integral or a perspectival spiritual about this, nothing whatsoever. But this is the essence of hypermodern art. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so we have three different epochs here: modernism, postmodernism, and hypermodernism, and they can't be confused. They don't overlap, and you can't confuse the one with the other. You can't crush them all together and say it's all integral, aperspectival. That simply does not work. And to do that is to show a decisive lack of perception or understanding of cultural forms, morphic forms, cultural morphology in the Spenglerian sense. All right, so I'll leave it there for you to ponder that, and then we'll discuss this in class.